1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Go to the crack of the bat, and we are off and running.
Punch the leather, Jamie. Let's get it going.
That is it, man. It's Detroit City of Champions. We're diving into the 1935 year, an amazing year in Detroit. And right now we're focused on a stellar, amazing athlete, Joe Louis, as chronicled in many books. Three of which were written by
Charles Avison.
I'm Jamie Flanagan, and just jumping into this story. But so how much of the first book, right? Because you wrote one, and then you wrote another subsequent two books diving more into individuals.
Well, the first book was about this, was like sort of an overall aerial view of the story.
Yeah,
it was basically like an overall. It looked at the entire story. But the second that I was done writing the first book, I realized that way more had to be done. Because there was, as we talked about, 33 championships in Detroit during this season.
Yeah.
And while I was writing the first book, I'm writing about all these different players, about these events. And the players who I'm writing about, I knew virtually nothing about.
Yeah.
And when I went to try to read and find information about these players so I could kind of understand more about the story, there's nothing out there. So the players were just as forgotten as the season itself. And that's what necessitated two more books, which the second two books, all they focus on is the players of 1935. And there was so many players, there was so much information about them that like the book, like I thought it was going to be another, couple 300 pages, but it got so huge. It was almost like 1,000 pages for the other two books.
Right.
And so I had to divide them in half. So what didn't look like, because I wasn't trying to sell an encyclopedia or like a giant web. I mean, a better thing is like a giant Webster's dictionary is what it would have looked like. And so I had to divide the books in half. And so thus, it came out as a trilogy. I kind of think it's cool to have a trilogy, like a trilogy of books,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I knew what, even while I was like really writing the first book, that much more needed to be done, because there's nothing out there. There's players I've never even heard of. And Joe Louis, who was the focus of the episodes we're doing now. When I first started this project, I was really attracted to the story because of the Tigers, Lions, and Red Wings having won their first championships in the same season. I thought that was just an incredible stat, story that had never been, nobody ever really dove into that. And then it was like really when I started getting into the book itself that I really started to look into just how important Joe Louis was as a cog in this entire story. And he was. The 1935, this is the rise of Joe Louis. Joe Louis before 1935, no one knew who he was. And that includes 1934, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, a few people around the city knew him.
Well, the people,
his name came up in Chicago
and stuff. And then people as we're going to see today, people inside the boxing world, they started to take notice of Joe Louis. Yeah. But outside of the boxing world, like the rank and file sports fans had no idea who Joe Louis was in 1934. He was a complete unknown. It wasn't until 1935 that he really exploded onto the scene. And once he exploded on the scene in 1935, the word exploded doesn't go far enough to explaining how big Joe Louis was in 1935. And by the end of 1935, he was an international icon. Okay. And this is an age, again, this is a segregated age, segregated era. The previous black, star of boxing was Jack Johnson, who was an incredibly polarizing figure. Right. Black and, like even, there was a side of like the black community, as we've already, mentioned in a couple of quotes, how even partially the black community was like, he's ruining it we're trying to make gains in this world. And he's over here, acting, in their own words, acting the fool, he's damaging what we're trying to do, which is to try to get our faces out in the public and be part of the American, professional sports world. And he, and that's what I mean. Like, he was a polarizing figure, Jack Johnson was. And that's when Joe Louis, when Joe Louis came along, it was Joe that made it palatable. Joe was the first international black sports icon that was universally loved. I mean, it was almost impossible to hate Joe Louis, especially, eventually it's going to get to this, a lot of people know about the Schmeling fight. And, and it's an easy example to show how important he was, because when Lewis was fighting against Schmeling, and that was in 1938, when Lewis was fighting against Schmeling, you had the choice. You had your choice between, are you going to root for a black American, or are you going to root for a white Nazi? You know, with somebody associated with the Nazi party.
Yeah.
So it created that paradox. And then that's what I'm saying, like Joe, and, you know, it's like, well, it was a barrier breaker for many people that were like, well, hell, we got to, you know, if the Nazis take the heavyweight championship back to Germany, Hitler's going to use the belt as a propaganda tool, you know? And so that's what I mean. So they're rooting for Joe, you know, and he had the personality and the, the image that made it palatable for everybody, to make it easy for people to root for him and to like him. And so
last week we were talking about Chappie, and he did all this training, and he got to this point where he was ready to make this move
to the professionals,
into the pros. And so that's where 1935 kicks in.
Well,
right?
34. That's where we're today. 34. Yeah.
Okay.
So 34, he's doing his amateur thing at the beginning of the year. And he realized, you know, they're in the minds of his manager, John Roxborough, they're saying, you know, he's like, well, you know, you just won the amateur heavyweight championship. Well, you know, let's 1935, we're going to put some more muscle on you, put some more weight on you, and you're going to come back as the amateur heavyweight champion of the country and of the world. And then you'll be ready for the pros. And Joe was like, no, I need to go pro now. Our family has no money.
Yeah.
We need the money. You know, I feel like I'm ready right now. I mean, he had to convince John Roxborough, who was financing him, to say, I'm ready now. I got to go pro now. And that's what we talked about last week, is how, you know, the couple of things he needed was connections in the boxing world. They needed money, and they needed a proper trainer for Joe. And that's what led them into Chicago, and Julian Black, who was John Roxborough's old business partner, old friend. And, you know, and John Roxborough bought half interest in Joe and his, you know, and the rights to, you know, running him is, you know, he infused money into the situation. And Julian Black, you know, brought money into the situation. And then Julian Black had the connections to know that the guy that they wanted to train Joe was Jack Blackburn, who is like this iconic, you know, like in every great boxing story, he's always got that crusty trainer who's seen it all, been there, you know, and he's like
the dames, Rock.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Mickey type figure. And really that's what the Jack Blackburn was. And so, and, you know, and it's even, you know, it's in the story, you know, I dive into it in the movie, in the screenplay for the movie to a large degree, you know, this dynamic between Joe and Jack Blackburn, which was like, Jack Blackburn was like, you know, he was an alcoholic. He had a big knife scar across his face. He's bloodied Jack Johnson in a sparring match. He's been around the world and back. You know, he's trained heavyweight champion, you know, or, you know, not heavyweight, but, you know, like welterweight champions. I mean, he's one of the great boxing trainers. Even in his era, everybody knew who Jack Blackburn was.
Yeah.
And so, but he's like this veteran with a world of experience. And then he comes and meets Joe, who is the complete opposite. He's a super nice guy. He's this like humble, like quiet kid who's like never been anywhere. I mean, was you know, born in Alabama. He had lived in Detroit, and he's like, you know, this God-fearing family that he's raised in. And he's basically like this, like, you know, naive, big, you know, kid who can just knock people out. That's really what he's dealing with.
Yeah.
But I think but we talked about a little bit last week at the end of the show, how I really think that, you know, the dynamic between these two is just so incredible, because, you know, I think that as great as Jack Blackburn was for Joe, I think Joe was phenomenal for Jack Blackburn. You know, Jack Blackburn, you know, I think in a lot of ways, Joe Louis sort of, you know, Jack Blackburn was like, when he first met Joe, he's like, I'm not training this kid. You know, he's got no chance to make me any money because he's black. I can't make no money off black fighters. I can't get any real good fights. And then he's like, unless he's like some kind of world beater. And then that's when his, you know, Roxborough and Julian Black are like, he is a world beater, Jack, and you got to take this kid on. And so, and then he proved to be that. He indeed proved to be a world beater, especially when he was taught all this style, this elite style by Jack Blackburn. Joe Louis had the raw punching and firepower ability. And then when, you know, mixed with the the fine-tuned sweet science discipline of Jack Blackburn, now Joe Louis was like, you know, he was like, you know, we're going to see becoming this well-tuned, fine-tuned machine, you know, right. You know, and so that's, you know, so that's what Joe Louis bringing. And when he goes into the boxing world, you know, boxing was, you know, an emerging, you know, sports science at the time, but a lot of the guys Joe's fighting are just really just, you know, to a large extent these kind of backroom brawlers who, you know, I'm sure, again, they trained and everything like this. There's no doubt about that. I mean, he's not the only one that's learned how to fight, but largely a lot of these guys are just these big mauling punchers who Joe now is going into the ring with, and he's learned, you know, he's learning discipline and all these things from Jack Blackburn. So Joe goes under the tutelage of, and this is again 1934, and really right about the same time that the Tigers are coming out of spring training.
Yeah.
The Tigers are becoming the darlings of the city. Joe Louis is a Tiger fan. He's a diehard Tiger fan. His favorite player is G. Walker from the Tigers.
Okay.
Who's, if we remember from the Tigers episode, G. Walker's the guy who was like he's the 1 second he'd be the hero of the game, and then the next second he'd be like the zero of the game. Like he'd get the game tying hit, get on first base, and then get picked off on first. You know, like that was the type of character he was, and the fans loved him, and Joe loved him too. That was his favorite player in the Tigers. And so, so in 1930, so at the same time that Joe is an unknown and he's coming out of the amateur ranks and being trained by Jack Blackburn, the Tigers are becoming the fascination of the city. The Lions are just arriving in Detroit. They're doing like a sort of a cross-state tour to introduce themselves and doing these little football camps and, trying to get the name Detroit Lions out there. They haven't even played a single game at this point. The Lions hadn't. But they're emerging in the city. Of course, the Red Wings are there. The Red Wings are just finishing up. The Red Wings started playing. I think it was November when they started playing 1934, and they're going to have a terrible season. But anyways, so this is the sort of world that Joe's coming into. And what's interesting is that the 4th of July, 1934, is Joe Louis's professional debut. This is his first fight. It's 4th of July, 1934. It's kind of an easy date to remember,
Yeah.
And this date, what's kind of interesting is this is only 4 weeks after beginning his training. I mean, he's only been training to become a pro for 4 weeks. Wow. It's only a single month he's been under the tutelage of Jack Blackburn. So he's going to basically be learning as he goes. He's learned enough to enter the ring as a pro, and he's just going to, every fight he's going to learn more and train between. And, Blackburn's going to keep on honing his skills, in between fights and as they go along. And so in his first fight, he fights a guy named Jack Kraken. And there's a great quote inside the Richard Back's book, who he's been helping us shepherd us through the early life of Joe Louis.
Love this book.
Absolutely. They're called The Great Black Hope by Richard Back. And so he talks in this book about, he really sets the stage for how Joe was like kind of nervous when he goes into the fight. And he's, this is his first pro fight ever. And it's a lot on the line, because if he loses his first pro fight, it's going to be maybe tough to get a second, or, his professional career is marred by a single loss, which happened in his very first fight. But, he kind of sets the stage about how Joe is nervous. But he need not be, because Joe gets a first round knockout. Knocks Jack Kraken on the first round. And at one point, Jack Kraken is knocked through the ropes. He has to climb back in, and he's counted out. And, it's just a beating that he puts on Jack Kraken in the first round.
Jeez.
And so anyways, and one of the interesting kind of stories from the fight is that after Jack Blackburn and the managers were noticing that Joe wasn't looking right during the fight. He looked like he was kind of sluggish. He looked like he was kind of ill. They're not sure what the situation, what was wrong. And then it came out after the fight that Joe had eaten a dozen bananas before the fight. A dozen, like he's eating a bunch. They're like, Jack Blackburn's like, "Hey kid, you're not smart. What are you doing? Like, why would you do this?"
I was nervous. I wanted to eat, just settle my stomach.
I saw the bananas. I was like, look good to eat and stuff.
Somebody brought me a basket of fruit.
I'm going to stuff my face.
I'm hungry.
So they decided after that they're going to strictly monitor Joe before these fights to make sure he doesn't do anything like this again. So he wins his first fight. And then 7 days later, he wins his second fight. And it was a 3rd round knockout of a guy named Willie Davis. And so in his first fight, Joe makes $59 for his first victory. His second fight, he makes $62.
Do I need that scorecard up yet?
Not yet. Okay, we can show that in a little bit.
All right.
So
$59 for his first fight?
First fight, he makes $59.
Okay.
And so Richard Back talks about in his book, how his managers let Joe the entire purse. It's not like that was Joe's cut of a larger purse.
Right. That was for the whole team.
That was the whole thing. And they were like, you know what, Joe, just keep the 59. This is on us. And so, because they're like, there's going to be bigger purses for us all to split. That they split the purse 50-50 between the managers and Joe and all this. And so they're just like, you know what, Joe, and you just keep the small change until we get to the bigger and bigger prize fights, you see. So the first fight, Joe makes $59.
Well, that's
pretty decent.
$1,200.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Today, today's money, that's $1,200.
Sure, that's what I mean. That's good. And then his second fight, he makes $62, as we just mentioned there.
That's jumping up. That's got to be like $1,300.
He's rising up, yeah. And so his third fight, his third fight and his third knockout in a row, second round knockout of a guy named Larry Udell. And in this case, it's a larger venue, 2,100 seats. All these fights that I'm mentioning now are in Chicago. I'll tell you when we change the location, but all these fights are in Chicago. And in this case, they move up to a larger venue. It's a 2,100 seat arena in a place called Marigold Gardens.
Oh, wow.
And so, the venue gets larger, the check gets larger, the purse gets larger. So he makes $101 in his third fight.
Get out.
3-0, 3 knockouts in his first 3 fights. This is July 29th, 1934. And so August 13th, 1934, he fights his fourth fight. And it's a 6-round decision over a guy named Jack Kranz. And this is a decision, in case for people that aren't familiar with the idea, is that at the end of the fight, they decide who won the fight, based on, the scorekeepers keep track of points, and then they award somebody a point for every time you punch a guy in the face or in the stomach or whatever, clean punch.
The kind of thing you land.
Yeah. So the decision went to Joe Louis. And after 6 rounds, he beats Jack Kranz and he makes $125. So,
that's getting up to close to $3,000.
Starting to make some cash. Yeah. So, so now we go to his fifth fight, which is it's August 27th against a guy named Buck Everett, and a second round knockout of Buck Everett, $150. He's moving up the ranks. See, so that's his fifth fight. Sixth fight, September 11th, 1934. He finished. So this is it's a little setup for this fight, because this is his first fight that he actually comes back home to Detroit. So this is his first fight in Detroit. He's been training in Chicago. He's been fighting in Chicago. The last time anybody in Detroit saw him, he was an amateur. Right. Now he's coming back for his first
heavyweight. He's got some weight on. He's got some muscle on. Exactly. He's got a couple of successful fights under his belt.
Yeah, a couple. He's 5-0 going into this fight. And so this is his first fight as a pro, and as such, it was a big deal for his family, his friends. He had a bit large group that came out to the Detroit, the Naval Armory in Detroit. And he's all, that are some of the stories I've read besides just Richard Back, but other stories and you can just imagine for yourself. Here he is, he's rolling right along, but now he's in front of his family. You see, now he's like, now there's a little sort of added pressure.
So he eats 12 bananas.
Well, they kept him away from all that. They kept him away from all that.
He eats 13 bananas.
So they kept him away from all that.
All right, good.
They kept him away from all this. But whatever reason, I mentioned this concept because he fights a guy named Alex Borchuk, who's from Windsor. And so during this fight, he's distracted or anxious or something is going on. And during this fight, Alex Borchak catches him with a punch and blows out one of Joe's teeth.
Oh,
knocks one of his teeth out.
Not our little Joe.
So right in front of his fans, in front of his family and friends, Joe gets one of his teeth knocked out during this first fight in Detroit.
Damn it!
So if you're the Brown Bomber, who's been rolling through, basically your entire career has been knocking people out, knocking them through the ropes. You've got your first 5 fights, you got 4 knockouts in your first 5 fights. Your sixth fight, a guy knocks your tooth out in front of your family and friends. What are you gonna do, Jamie?
I'm going to knock him to the ground.
There you go. That's exactly what happened. So Joe gets basically furious. His tooth gets knocked out in the second. In the fourth, Joe tears Alex Borchuk apart.
Oh, my God.
And so he knocks him down 3 times. The third time Borchuk gets knocked down is so ugly that that his manager threw in the towel, which is the sign of saying this is over. So that's, so the manager throws in the towel. Joe ends up taking all of his friends and family bowling after the event. But shortly before he takes them all bowling, there's this incident with the Michigan boxing commissioner named Bingo Brown. This is chronicled in, again, Richard Back's book, where there's I guess you call it an attempted shakedown. And the idea being that Bingo Brown is saying to Joe's manager, saying, one of my boys wants to be Joe's manager. And you're going to bring him in and let him, be a manager for you. And they're like, no, we're not. Why would we do that? And he's like, because if you don't, you're never going to get another fight in Michigan again, because I'm the boxing commissioner here.
Right.
And so Richard Back spends a little time talking about the issue and whether it was like a legit, massive shakedown or whether it was like sort of tongue in cheek or whatever the situation was. But he mentions it as a story that happened after this fight, which was that they had kind of attempted to shake Joe's managers down a little bit. And so, but his managers were like, then we'll fight every other place in the country except for here. You know what I mean? You really want to have, this guy's an up and comer. This guy's, starts to become a player in the boxing world. You really don't want to have a hometown son come to Detroit and Michigan.
Yeah.
And when they come and tell us, why won't you fight in Detroit? We say it's because this guy tried to shake us down. You really want, like they had, a lot of good things happen when you got a world beater. You know what I mean? When you got a star on the rise, there's a lot of, in this, but it's an interesting story because it just kind of shows you the stuff that was going on back in those days for people that were maybe not world beaters, that maybe were not, didn't have the super, the rising star power that Joe had, which was, you can see some of these traps that other people may have had to fall into because they're like, well, we need to fight in Detroit for God's sake. It's a big venue, it's a big boxing venue. So you can just, it's illuminating, just kind of, it's a story. It kind of shows a little bit of a light on the boxing world at that time that such a thing would happen. So anyways, Joe ends up back in Chicago for his 7th fight. And this is it's a 10th round decision against a guy named Adolph Wyatter. He makes $200 for this fight. He made $106 for the fight in Detroit.
Okay.
He makes $200 for this fight. This is Arcadia Gardens in Chicago. And it's at this exact moment that the Tigers are in the World Series versus St. Louis Cardinals, which we'll talk about in the Tiger section. Just to kind of I like to kind of give a little bit of a time reference here.
Sure.
What's going on in the Detroit world, in the City Champions world as the story progresses. So that's September 26th, 1934. October 24th, about a little bit close to about a month later, October 24th, Joe fights his 8th fight against a guy named Art Sykes, again in Chicago in Arcadia Gardens. And in this fight, Joe knocks out Art Sykes, but the way he knocks him out, his head hits this ugly bounce off the canvas. So it goes like head first because the knockout is so brutal. And so Art Sykes' head bounces off the canvas and he's knocked unconscious. He's got to go to the hospital.
Oh boy.
And Joe is basically horrified of what he's just done.
Right.
Like he's living up to this, Jack Blackburn is living up to this reputation where he's turned Joe, he like manufactured him into a killer. You know what I mean? Like because now Joe is, and there's Richard Back mentions book, that Joe was so horrified that he said if Art Sykes was permanently debilitated or didn't wake up from this because he was unconscious from this, that he was like going to quit. Like he was like, I'm done boxing if he doesn't wake up, because he was so mortified about the way that this guy had landed, his head had hit.
Right.
So it just kind of but Art Sykes would wake up. He was revived at the hospital.
Ooh, okay.
And so Joe doesn't quit. Instead he takes $280. His career keeps rolling right along.
Yeah, that's he's closing in on $5,000.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. So,
Yep.
Well, I added them all. Yeah, we'll get there. So October 30th.
In today's money.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
One person.
I was going to say, I didn't want to make you feel bad because I was just doing the numbers quick in my head, and that's not. We're like 100 here, $50 there. I'm like, I don't think we're there at $5,000 yet. But
no, in today's money, that one person.
Okay, good.
In today's money, that's about close to $5,000.
Yeah. So two makes 280. Which is, in comparison with $5,000 at today's money, that's a solid take. He's doing all right. And so his 9th fight is against Jack O'Dowd, a second round knockout, $111. And then so November 14th, Joe fights his 10th fight, first round knockout against Stanley Pareda, $300. November, are we sensing a trend here?
Yeah.
Are we sensing a knockout trend here? Like we're ripping through the story.
Mama said, knock you out.
Yeah, we're ripping through the story. But like the real life, Joe is going through these fights, first round knockout, second round knockout, third round knockout. He is destroying every person in his path. One guy, and it's like, again, we just mentioned it, Art Sykes in his 8th career fight, he has to be revived in the hospital. He's unconscious. Joe is destroying people along this road, okay? And so November 14th, he becomes 10-0 with a first round knockout against Stanley Pareda, $300. November 30th, 1934, 11-0, third round knockout. Charlie Macera. He knocked Charlie. The way he knocked Charlie Macera out, they say the description of him. This comes from my book. That Charlie Macera was knocked out and he hung on the ropes like a sack of wheat. That's how he left. That's how he left Charlie Macera, was hung up in the ropes like a sack of wheat, like he was dangling, knocked out against the ropes.
I love the way these writers write.
Yeah, he hung him up like a sack of wheat.
What was ropes, Ernie Hardwell? Ernie Hardwell's. He's like, left him standing there like a house by the side of the road.
Yeah, so
like, just that right in the
But that's what these writers. That's what they're saying. Like he left him hanging there like a sack of wheat, and then against these ropes. But as a boxing fan, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see this electric kid knockout artist that just bam, bam, one after another. Third round leaves a guy dangling like a sack of wheat on the ropes, and so he takes home $1,200 for this fight.
Wow!
So from 4th of July to November 30th, he's gone from $59 to $1,200. And so his final fight in 1934 is December 14th. And it's his 12th fight against a guy named Lee Ramage, who was at the time he was ranked as he's one of the best heavyweights in the world. He's at least in America, they called him the best heavyweight fighter on the West Coast.
Okay.
And so a good fight against Joe, but Joe, it's a TKO. Joe, it's a technical knockout, similar to where a guy throws in the towel, which means that somebody else ended the fight. The guy didn't end up knocked out.
The ref called it. It's like, he's bleeding too much. Stop. He's or whatever.
Brutalized. Usually it's a guy who's been beaten too bad.
The birds are flying around his head.
Yeah.
Tweet.
Exactly. Usually somebody else needs to stop the fight because the guy won't stay down type of thing. So it's technically recorded as a knockout, but it goes in the books as they call it a technical knockout or TKO.
Yeah.
So Lee Ramage, he beats Lee Ramage in the 8th round TKO, and Joe takes $2,200 home for this fight. $2,200.
Wow.
In little less than 5 months, he's gone from $59 a fight for his first fight to $2,200 for this fight. What's that?
And that's about $45,000.
$45,000. He goes from, was the first fight $500, you said?
Yeah.
From the modern day equivalent, 2021 equivalent of a $500 paycheck to $45,000 in 7 months. What does that tell you about this guy's rising career?
Yeah, he's in a year's time.
It's a year. If we're talking about the amateurs, but I'm talking about from his first professional fight in 4th of July.
Oh my God.
To December 14th. That's
6 months.
6 months. He goes from a check of $500 to 40, the modern day 2021 equivalent of $45,000 for a fight. Right. That's, this is insane money. Like this is a huge payday for him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so the $2,200 that he got for this 12th fight was roughly equates to the sum total of all the 11 previous fights that he had done, all wrapped up into one. Like this is like he made more in this fight than almost as much as he did. It's near, I think it's like $2,400 if you add all the first 11 fights up.
The average salary in 1934 was $837.
Yeah, and Richard Bax talks about in the book. He says
so that's about almost.
He says basically
well over twice.
He's saying Richard Bax says in his book that it's roughly a year's salary for a decent paid worker.
That's the average salary was $837 in 1934.
Well, now we're going against Richard Back's book, but if we, if the
this is just
I'm just joking.
This is Jamie googling off the cuff.
But generally speaking, it's in that general radius. An average salary to a
this is salary. Average wage in 1934. That's like Depression time. So
exactly, it can range, but somewhere in that network. Joe pocketed that from one fight.
Yeah,
and this is of course his family and friends are just going, man, this guy, my brother, my friend Joe is coming up in the world, you see. And so, so the mentality of his managers and trainers, like, this kid's generating excitement, right? I mean, you can see it, just from the paycheck that he got from this fight, that they're like, we got a guy that's on the rise. He's 12-0. 10 of those wins are by knockout or technical knockouts. He's only had 2 decisions of those 12 fights. He's been rampaging his way through these ranks. They're all knockouts and like first, second round knockouts.
Damn.
And so, they're like, now it's our chance. Now is our time to reach out to the Madison Square Garden. To get a shot at the biggest venue in the country, because Madison Square Garden is where the
big fights happen.
Capital of the boxing world. And so they call the there's the boxing man, the promoter of the Madison Square Garden, the boxing promoter. His name was James Johnson, and he says in no uncertain terms he's not fighting here. He's not fighting here because there's no money in it. In his, in the book, in the quote of the Times, there's no money in colored fighters. I've heard other choice words used about it, which were a little bit even more brutal. That were even a more stinging rejection based on the color of his skin. But in either case, whatever the exact quote or terminology was, he was rejected because they're like, he ain't, he's the wrong color.
Yeah.
You see? And so it's at this point that so many other black boxers since Jack Johnson,
that's the wall.
The barrier that they hit was this moment.
You can box in your state, do as well as you'd like.
Box out in the boonies, do whatever you want on these other different locations.
The main stage,
but the main stage
not for you.
Not for you. Exactly. And so that's the barrier that these other, like we started talking about, Harry Wills and Sam Langford and these guys had all hit this barrier where you can fight, but you ain't fighting in the big stage. You ain't going to get a shot at the belt. No, because if Joe gets a shot at the belt, he wins in Madison Square Garden. The next natural conclusion is they want to see him fight against top white heavyweights.
So his record, how many fights did he have?
He's 12-0.
He's 12-0.
Yeah, and so
Jesse just chimed in. He's like 12-0 in 6 months. That's amazing.
Anyway, Joe is built. Jesse, what's his last name? Do I know?
Where'd it go? Medina.
That's my boy, Jesse. How you doing, man? Long time no see, bro. So anyways, I had to give him a quick shout. I can't let my boy Jesse message in and not say hi to him. Good. All right. Okay. So anyways, 12-0, 10 wins by knockout or technical knockout. Joe's getting no press, no highlight, no glitz around his name, but boxing insiders know who he is. Okay. Because this guy's ripping up the circuit, right?
Anybody that's been in the arena to see one of his fights
knows who he is.
We should be talking about this guy.
Yeah.
This is I want to book him. I want him. I want him to not fight my guy, but I'm
about to follow him around the country to watch him knock people out.
I want to sell the fight that he's going to be in.
Absolutely. So anyways, and to show how boxing insiders knew who Joe was, like I say, if he was an outside name, then the Madison Square Garden would have given him a fight because it would have been a draw. But to show how boxing insiders knew who he was is the evidence of that comes from the very first issue of 1935 Ring magazine, which has long been especially in these days, was the magazine. Ring magazine was the magazine that talked about boxers across the country. And it was a national publication. It was a well-established publication in 1935. Talked about, it's like the authority on boxing. In 1935, the first issue of 1935 Ring magazine in 1935 ranks Joe number 9.
Whoa. Okay.
Top 10. Joe's in the top. He breaks the top 10 in Ring magazine.
His first 8 months boxing pro.
8? Yeah. 6. He starts out in July. Yeah. So, it's 5 months. 5 months. He's in the top 10 in the boxing world.
Knocked out a flurry of dudes.
Yeah. And so, but Ring magazine ranks him number 9. And at this moment, Max Bayer's the heavyweight champion. He's ranked number 1. And so, so they're, and Lee Ramage is in there too somewhere. And so Joe cracks the top 10 by the end of the year. Jeez. That's what shows that these insiders knew who Joe. The insiders knew who he was. The insiders of the boxing world, but he wasn't yet a draw. The mainstream population did not know who he was.
Yeah.
And so anyways, it was a happy Christmas at the Joe Louis household. Joe buys his first car. It's a black Buick with white wall tires. He's buying himself nice suits. He's buying gifts for his family. They have this great Christmas, this Christmas of Detroit in 1934. And in my screenplay, that's where I leave off episode 1 of the Joe Louis story. There's 2 episodes for each subject. Joe Louis gets his 2 episodes. The Tigers, Lions, and Red Wings each get 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And in the first, this is the very first episode of this screenplay. Think of it like again as a Netflix miniseries. The end of the first episode leaves off, and this is artistic license. This is me writing this. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll leave off to because I love the image, and this again, this didn't happen, okay? But I like to think that it did because we just talked about a happy Christmas at the Joe Louis household.
Sure,
it's a very what things happen. So I imagine kind of what cool things would happen. In the way that I envisioned it was that Joe and his family were celebrating Christmas. They're all excited because they're getting these different gifts. There's a whole house full of kids. There's 16 total kids in this, or 17 total kids in this family, including the extended family that, Joe's mother married into. It's this huge family. They're all getting gifts. They're all having fun. And I wrote it into the screenplay as there's a knock at the door. Jack Blackburn comes into the house and they're all excited to see him because at this point, Jack and Joe have this relationship again where they call each other Chappie.
Yeah.
You see, they're friends. And so I wrote it in the screenplay as Jack Blackburn comes in the door and he's sort of like shy because this isn't the type of environment that he's normally in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's in the crusty realm. He usually spends Christmas alone. You know what I mean? But now there's this loving, household where they're all like, oh, Jack, hey, Jack. And Joe's mom, who's a heavy set black woman, runs up and gives Jack Blackburn a hug. Thank you for, Joe, for taking care of my boy, and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the image that I had in my head when I wrote that. And so Jack comes in and they're all, hey, Jack, would you like some, coffee and stuff? And so Jack says, well, I got a gift for Joe. And he pulls out of his jacket a wrapped, square, something or other. And Joe opens it and it's a Ring magazine. He opens it up and sees he's a ranked boxer.
Yeah.
So he basically gets kind of an advanced copy, sees that he's a ranked boxer. And that's when everybody he's like, I'm ranked. You know what I mean? Because now the world opens up for him.
Sure.
As a top 10 ranked boxer, he can get a fight, kind of anywhere. He can't fight at Madison Square Garden, but that's going to come.
Madison Square is still a no for that.
It's still
right now?
Well, yeah, because he just had the call with the Madison Square Garden in recent memory that, it was after this Lee Ramage fight that they call up the Madison Square Garden and they get rejected. And that's in December 14th. So right before Christmas, they get rejected. And then shortly thereafter, the Ring magazine comes out and Joe was ranked. And so now this is Joe's, the beginning of Joe, because now as a ranked boxer, he might be closed off to the Garden. But there's plenty of places they're going to want to have a top 10 boxer come in as a draw.
Yeah.
So this was a big break for him. And so the way that I concluded the episode was they're all excited. They're all happy. And Joe breaks out a violin and butchers Pop Goes the Weasel on a violin while everybody's singing and dancing to this song. That's how I leave off in the episode 1. Yeah. It is kind of how we can leave off this episode.
That works.
But I mean, at the very end, we can wrap up this particular component of this, this really all I wanted to cover for this.
Joe on the violin.
Joe, but
that's,
he butchers it. He butchers it because he never learned to play it. Because he took the violin lessons, but he never
took the money.
But he took the money from the violin lessons
and
took boxing lessons. So that's what. So it's kind of like the joke that I bring back periodically throughout the movie, just a couple of different times where
bring it back.
Where we bring it back, where Joe's got a violin. In fact,
callback.
And there's actually pictures of Joe with that joke. There's a training camp.
I got it up right now.
Oh, did I bring that in there with the? Oh,
no,
I did give you that file. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, there's that actual picture where
him and Julian Black, and
he's got the violin. It looks like a miniature, looks like a ukulele in his hands because he's such a big guy. But anyways, but that was like kind of a reoccurring joke, was based on that, that Joe was a violin player as well as a boxer, and so that's why I wrote that into the screenplay. I thought it was kind of a cool way to end that episode, because it does because now as a ranked boxer, he's got a chance. He's got a chance to do more if he can keep winning, if he can keep knocking people out and keep pounding his way through the boxing world. Boxing at this exact moment is looking for a star. The heavyweight champion Max Baer. We're definitely gonna get to him. He's one of my favorite people in this of all the stories. Max Baer has been demonized in movies. Sure. Cinderella Man portrayed him as this guy that was telling, because he'd accidentally killed a guy in the ring, and he's in the movie Cinderella Man. He's telling James Braddock's wife, you're basically kill your husband in the ring, and then then you're gonna be my wife. It's really making him out to be a horrible guy. Totally vilified him. When in reality, Max Baer was traumatized by that incident, and really it wrecked his entire career because he never wanted to hurt anybody ever again.
Right.
And once you lose that killer instinct from boxing, not wanting to hurt somebody or going the full distance, that's when you basically become gun shy, and it wrecks your career.
Well, Joe had that near
similar in this story too.
Yeah.
If he would have, he even said, like, I'm about to quit boxing if this guy doesn't wake up. I mean, it's a traumatizing thing. And so for them to use that as a component to demonstrate his bad guyness, when in reality, Baer was a showman. He loved to be a showman. He's more equivalent to a modern day, they call him the heel in a wrestling match where the guy like intentionally tries to antagonize the crowd. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they do, like they're like guys try like blowing kisses, doing the guy's wife in the crowd, or doing whatever, like showing off in front of the crowd and stuff. Like doing whatever he can to antagonize the crowd, because in the world of show business, it's better to be, hated or loved. You don't want to be ignored. If you're either hated or you're ignored, one way or the other, as long as people have a strong emotion towards you. Yeah. But if you're just in the middle where nobody cares one way or the other, then you're not going to be a star. You're not going to have anybody that cares. And so that's right. So Max Baer, for whatever reason, he particularly liked to be that heel, where he antagonized the crowd. Sure. But it was a good-natured thing. He was it was a great guy in public. He was a super nice guy. And it's actually
it's a show, I mean, it was like the WWE and the I don't know, whatever alphabet soup of wrestling is today. And you would have people that would antagonize for the fun of it.
Absolutely.
And it would be fun.
And Baer antagonizer, he was one of the hardest punchers in boxing history, still ranked by Ring Magazine as one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. Tremendous fighter. And he was like this antagonist. And the reason I kind of we did this little aside towards Baer is to say that like he was the biggest name in boxing. He was probably the biggest name in boxing. Of course, he's the heavyweight champion at this moment, but he's not necessarily like there's room for a bigger star in this world is what I'm saying. He was a star. There's no doubt about that. He was a star, but there was no really a superstar. Like the last really big superstar was Jack Dempsey in the 1920s. In the Gene Tunney fight, there hadn't been $1 million gate. There had not been a fight, $1 million, where they drew $1 million since I think it was 1926. I've got it written down, like 26, something like that. Where there was $1 million fight, because the fans there was nobody. Boxing, like many sports, derives its excitement off of star power, off of like, here's the, like Mike Tyson or these big name guys that are going to draw, like the most recent memory, Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather, these mega stars that draw these huge crowds. And so boxing, Max Baer was a star. He was a draw absolutely, it was a draw. He's a heavyweight champion. Then, just being the heavyweight champion alone brings a certain cachet to it. But there wasn't a mega star in boxing, and there was room for that, and people wanted that. And so that's the moment that Joe was coming along in. And for people that saw him, especially his early managers saw him in the early days, they're recognizing a guy that potentially that could be that. And eventually that is what is going to, the fact that he's in the top 10 in boxing, the potential of the superstardom is the thing that, will eventually, not to, spoiler alert, I just gave it away, but that's what's going to lead him to get to break this barrier of the Madison Square Garden. Right. It's going to take a couple other opportunities as well that kind of fuse together. But
we'll find about that next time.
I was going to talk about tonight.
Oh,
no, we're done. We're good. We just ran. No, I wasn't going to talk about it tonight.
Okay.
I told you already. We finished it up when we were talking about the 34 ending of the movie. I should have left it there because it was such a smooth pointed.
Because right at that point, Jesse chimed in and said, "Great story. I'm taking that to the barbershop tomorrow."
Also, I tell him, hey, Jesse, I need to get my hair cut at your barbershop, man. I'm all right now, but next time I got to come out to your barbershop. I haven't been there yet.
So we want to thank Jesse and everybody else who chimed in. Gareth and Chris and Catherine all chimed in.
We appreciate it. We appreciate everybody.
Well. So if you've come this far, if you haven't already subscribed or collected or followed or whatever it is on the platform you're doing, go to just stop right now and go to your favorite podcast platform and give us a follow, give us a comment. We truly appreciate it. That would help.
Do I get a quick second to give a shout out to everybody that commented in? Because I feel bad if I only mentioned Jesse. If everybody else is,
I mentioned them all.
Well, I want to say thank you to
All right.
everybody. I want to
Go
say,
ahead.
do we know?
I will give you permission to do that.
Well, who's the? Well, I don't need.
I
your
said it
permission.
already. I
I'll
said
do what I want to do.
Garrett.
I'm telling a freaking story. I'll tell what I want to. Gareth is my boy Giggs. I don't know his last name.
Bowen.
Yeah, that's my boy Giggs. He lives in England. He's an Irishman. He's a Tiger fan. He loves it out. So yeah, he's
Chris was hanging out. How?
Absolutely, Uncle Chris. Thanks for listening. Thanks for chiming in.
Catherine.
Catherine's our diehard. Catherine's probably our biggest fan. My sister Catherine, she's got a City of Champions sticker in the Coast Guard station out in Maryland. I shouldn't tell that. I don't know if that's legal, governmental issue stuff, but we got a City of Champions sticker hanging up in the office of the Coast Guard out in Maryland. So, or DC actually. So. Thanks for everybody for writing. We appreciate all the comments and everything. And if
Gareth
you'd like
actually typed in, he said, "Great story, Charles."
If you would like to hear your name mentioned on the City of Champions podcast, please just type in a comment and like the thumbs up the button.
That's it. That's we're a sucker for a comment.
Oh, I'm a total sucker for a comment. We got to mention our follow. We got to mention our the show fans on here. So.
We appreciate it. So YouTube and Facebook and the website. So but on your favorite podcast platform, give us a like and a follow and a comment, and thank you. We're gonna do it again.
1935 is next week. This is the Grand Poobah.
Holy crap.
This is where 34 again. The entire arc of this Joe Louis segment is to make the case that 1935 Joe Louis was the greatest individual season in the history of American sport.
Are we going to be able to do that in one episode? Or are we going to need two?
Yeah, we're going to need a couple. Probably.
All right, fair enough. I was like, we might need a few. Okay,
we might drag it. We're on episode 43 here. Jay. Let's make it. It might be 45 or 46.
Okay, that's cool.
Good. We'll
begin the case.
We're going to take our time to We're going to get our time. Though we've laid the ground. The sort of the foundation for the city for Joe Louis 35. But it's a big case to make.
Yeah.
Because Joe did not. Spoiler alert. Joe did not win the heavyweight championship in 1935.
No.
He was the only one. We have 33 championships in 1935.
That on Champions Day we did the broadcast at the museum in front of the plaque.
Yes.
And
Joe wasn't on it.
They had boxing gloves on it when they started, and they took them off. They took them off and put a swimmer or something.
Yeah, because he had lost it in third when they were making the plaque. He'd lost it in 36 to Schmeling.
Yeah.
So, but at the time he still wasn't the heavyweight champion. Even when he lost to Schmeling, at 35 he was not the heavyweight champion. He would not become the heavyweight champion 35. And the reason I mention that is, and we've said this on 2 or 3 shows, well, I think we've said it on every show at this point, is that despite the fact that Joe did not win the heavyweight championship in 1935, I still am going to make the case that 1935 was the greatest individual season in American sport history for any athlete with Joe Louis. Yes. And the thing is, we're starting already with a handicap that he's like every other great individual season starts with usually that player won the heavyweight, the batting championship or the World Series or whatever. They usually win the championship for their team or their particular sport. It almost is like a prerequisite for even beginning to consider whether an individual had the greatest season ever. In Joe Louis, we begin with a handicap that he did not win. And nonetheless, I'm going to make the case that it was indeed the greatest individual season without that fact being part of the equation.
Well, I believe you. All right, so we'll do it again next time. Thank you for joining us.
Are you just saying that?
I know, I'm not just saying.
You're not just saying that. You believe?
I truly believe.
I think you mean that. I think you mean that. I believe me too.
All right, so next time, put them up.